Welcome to the Sojourn Wealth Management Podcast. My name is Jeff Bronner, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Corey Akins and Andrew Kraft. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that should be applicable to a general audience, that is workplace retirement plans. This is a complicated topic, and there's a lot of complexities to it, but we want to try to provide some insights on common mistakes we've seen people make. So, gentlemen, let's start day one. A new employee gets hired on. They have this retirement plan available to them. What are some potential ditches that they might run into? And what are some things they need to be thinking about right off the bat?
Yeah, I don't think that you should miss out on the free money if they're going to give it to you.
Good point.
So if you start at a place and there's going to be a match within your retirement contributions, don't make the mistake of defaulting out of it or electing not to do it or not contributing enough to get the match, because it is worth it. So that would be my initial thought on day one, kind of sitting down in the first 30 minutes of the retirement presentation.
So first question, is there a match?
Yeah, is there a match? And if so, how do I participate? How do I get that match?
And the maximum match, right?
Yes.
There's also some default contribution amounts, and so you might start at 2%, but the match is actually up to 3%. So just make sure you're getting all the free money.
Yeah,
Understanding how that works so that you can make sure you're not missing out on that immediate opportunity.
And if it's expected to change, like, is this kind of a set in stone thing? Is this going to go up? Like, does it go down? Like, are there any other nuances to it that I need to be aware of? Like, after a year of work, does it go to 4.5% versus 2%? What are some of the changes there? That would be my first question on day one. And I think a lot of people, make the mistake of just kind of going through it and not asking more questions about it and, ensuring that they get it.
Yeah.
And usually you're in a hurry and there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a really complicated topic. And so sometimes you're kind of quick to fill in forms.
The room is typically like freezing.
Right. Yeah. You're late for the meeting with your new manager, and so you're trying to hurry. And so another common mistake is maybe skipping over the beneficiary section. You're thinking, okay, that's way down the road. That doesn't have to do with today. And so, I've got my will done. That'll govern it. That type of thing. And so I think not filling in the beneficiary, not really understanding that controls who gets the funds, is another mistake that we've seen.
It's really important, because if you don't do that, then what is it, Jeff, you said earlier? It's public, expensive, and slow.
Yes.
Right. All bad things.
Public, expensive, and slow. What we mean by that is if you don't fill in any beneficiaries and then something happens to you and you pass away, well, that money is going to go to your estate, and then the estate is going to be handled through probate. And then that's, again, where the public, slow, and expensive comes in. Whereas if you just elect beneficiaries, it bypasses that and goes directly to them. But then that also has another kind of, flip side to that coin is who you elect.
Keeping it up to date.
Yeah.
It's really important. I mean, life happens, people pass away, divorce, marriage. So just a little anecdote. When I was working as an advisor in Texas, I was at a junior college HR department, and they were telling me about a situation that had just happened. An employee had passed away, and his beneficiary was his beneficiary was his ex-wife. And so when he passed away, his wife did not receive any of those funds from his retirement account, and she came up to the benefits department and was pretty hot under the collar because there's nothing she could do about it. It governed the distribution.
It supersedes the will. So even if you have a will done and you're thinking, well, this document that I've put together with my attorney is going to be the source for all of my elections as far as my property, my assets. That's not how it works, because they're contract driven. So the beneficiary, whoever it is going to be receiving the distribution upon death. And that can be somebody you don't want it to be, like in that example.
And that's a mistake, a common mistake that I think, like you said, can be corrected, pretty quickly.
Yeah. You can do that today. If you're listening to the podcast, you can do that today, and it takes typically about 10 minutes. if you have online access and things like that, you can go in and just update it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, knowing what's available to you with a match, making sure that those dollars are accessible or that you're taking advantage of that benefit, and then making sure that your beneficiaries on the plan are aligned with your estate documents or your will or whatnot, or making sure that that's updated as life goes on.
And one other thing I'll mention, like the classically trained might be upset I don't mention this Latin phrase. And so as far as beneficiaries go, often there's a little box you can check that says per stirpes, which is Latin for by the branch, which means that if one of your beneficiaries passes away before you do, then their children will be disinherited if you don't check that box. Otherwise, if you do, it'll go to their kids. And so it's just a way to kind of keep your grandkids in line of inheritance. So those beneficiary forms are important.
Absolutely. Another piece of the puzzle on day one is making sure you're picking the right plan, right? So a lot of times, especially in higher education, you'll have options, and with those options typically comes a vesting schedule. And so making sure that, like in an area that I work a lot is college athletics, and so that career in a lot of ways is not conducive to vesting schedules because of so much change and volatility in it. So ensuring that if your place of employment has a 4 or 5 year vesting period, that you're either going to be there for those years or go with the other option that is immediately vested if you have that option.
Because that just means ownership of the assets in the plan. A vesting schedule slowly means you take control of it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if, like, for instance, if you're a coach and you go to a new school and there's a 5 year vesting period, it's probably not in your best interest to go with that plan. You want to see if they have something that is going to be immediately vested, to where you immediately own all of the assets that are employer or employee directed. And so that can be something that is really, really just a simple thing, but, kind of going to have implications later.
Right. And so it's to boil down this first kind of component of day one, what are we thinking about? You need to know how the plan works, and then you need to know how to modify it to your particular situation. And once you get into that vesting schedule discussion that you're describing there, Corey, at that point, let's say that it's not in your best interest, like you're saying, to go with the plan that has a vesting schedule. Typically, the other option is going to be an investment-driven retirement account, which means that you have to think about allocations, how you're going to be invested in this. What are some potential common mistakes that might manifest when people are choosing their investment options?
Yeah, I think the first one is just assuming that the default election that the government or the plan has chosen for you is the best one for you. Oftentimes that kind of default automatic choice is a target date fund, which essentially means it's tied to your date of birth, and that's going to be, they kind of just add on 60 years or whatever to that, and that's going to be roughly when you retire. But that might not be. And so your situation is unique to you. It's not going to be the same as everyone else born the same year that you were. And so just assuming that that's the right option, I think is a common mistake. Even though it's a a good diversified option, it might not be the best one for you.
Yeah. I've also, just to add this in, I've seen where if you have multiple company options, I've seen choosing multiple companies to manage your retirement funds as kind of a diversification
the appearance
strategy
of diversification.
Yeah. So I think that's a common mistake because it just involves more paperwork, more like when you go to get money out, you have to deal with so many more companies now. You can achieve diversification through choosing, funds that are within, that are going to fit your risk tolerance, your risk objective, which kind of goes into, making sure that the funds you do choose aren't all weighted kind of to the same sector or to the same asset class. So you want to make sure, in your variable funds, that there is diversification where you're covering equities or covering bonds, and it's built out the way it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think we've covered this a little bit in previous podcasts with how a lot of funds are weighted, large cap are weighted toward the Magnificent Seven. And I think I kind of mentioned, early on back in January of 2000, when I started working with a lot of folks and their retirement plans, they were really heavily weighted toward the tech sector, and they would have 4 or 5 different funds thinking they're diversified, but and some of them were obviously tech focused.
Just all had Microsoft in them.
NASDAQ or science and technology, but then global growth or OTC opportunities, some names maybe a little innocuous. And so, but still they were in the same sector. And so just kind of making sure that you have that true diversification is important, and a common mistake that folks make by not doing that.
Yeah. And on day one, right, it's easy to kind of set it and forget it. I think it's important to review that. But another thing that can happen is you don't make any election, right? And so the default could be to the fixed account option, which brings a whole host of other restrictions and things that, if you're going to put money there, you really need to know how it operates and then how you can take it out. Are there any examples that you have of, that kind of being done poorly?
Yeah, that specific restrictions sometimes are spread out over 5 or 10 years, and so generally, if you have money in this fixed account, and just unpack that a little bit, the safe option in employer retirement plans typically used to be just like a money market, which kind of think bank savings account earning 0.1, diddly squat type thing, and so that's been replaced by these guaranteed investment accounts where they'll just you're going to get 3%, 4%, kind of, think a turbocharged CD. But with that, there's some restrictions. And so, often we've run across folks who have a lot of money in these fixed accounts when there should possibly be a little bit, a small, piece of the overall pie. But then when they come to retire, they now realize they can only access 10% or sometimes 5%, as much as 20 we've seen. But again, there's a restriction there that was unaware when folks started. And so just kind of knowing those investment restrictions ahead of time can help you plan and navigate that earlier.
And depending on plan, even after retirement, it can still be, it's not as common, but still happens where you can have somebody trying to move money out of that plan and they're unable to move at all. Right. And so that is something that needs to be really, understood beforehand.
Yeah.
And if you're like 5 or 10 years out, like you said, Andrew, planning on like, okay, where are the assets now? What are the investments? Is this the most efficient way for when we want to land the plane in retirement? So maybe you'd add that as a common mistake, planning for retirement on the day you retire.
Well, that actually gets to a point, Corey, you've mentioned this a couple different ways, is that whether it be reviewing when the match changes or reviewing from a beneficiary standpoint, making sure that your estate planning documents are aligned with the way your beneficiaries are designated, and now talking through investment allocations, not just defaulting, but being particular to your life circumstances. How do your investments reflect that? And then when you're getting closer to retirement, how can something like the fixed account election affect the way that you're going to be able to distribute your funds into retirement? So we've talked a lot about day one. What are the things that we need to be aware of? Go ahead, Corey.
I just want to jump in there because I think so often, like I live in this world, you guys live in this world, there can be a sense of like, have you done your financial planning? Right? Like, okay, yeah, I've done that. Like that's over. But it's not, right? So the planning is always going to be ongoing. And so like if you're listening to the podcast and maybe you're thinking like this is a one-time kind of just do everything. It's really more of an ongoing walking with you through life as it changes. These just happen to be the things that are along the way from a retirement and financial planning standpoint. So maybe there's, expectations out there that have been given even just from the like our space where it's like, oh, hey, here's this plan, like good luck. It's really more of we want to make sure the matching benefit, beneficiaries, vesting, all of those things are part of the ongoing planning. And that's not ever really going to stop.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to note.
Absolutely. And that's perpetuated by the phenomenon we're talking about with day one. There is a ton that's being thrown at you.
Yes.
And so if you're able to take care of all of that, then it feels like that box has been checked.
Yes.
And so you can feel as if, there is a trueness to the sense that, you need to get those things taken care of, but that is not where the process stops.
Right.
That's why we're not called static wealth management, right?
Right.
That's right.
That's-
a different acronym. We're
Sojourners. That's right.
And so very good point, Corey. I'm glad that you said that. Let's talk about that meeting, that planning, that comprehensive preparation for distribution. So day one, these are all the things we need to consider. And then as we're getting closer to retirement, what are ways that we can navigate retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, and what are some potential common mistakes that could be made there?
Well, I think we've mentioned it, but the first common mistake that I think is waiting until that time to like plan about it or talk through it. So that would be my first thing is like if you're at that place and it's the first time you're going over it, it's like, it should have been started sooner. So I avoid that mistake if you can.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll just call it day of retirement. But Corey, like you mentioned, this really means years prior. But kind of figuring out the different options of where are you going to take the money from? From where are you going to take the money?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are the different types of pension options if you have a pension? I mean, so many different options there, complicated, kind of just fraught with common mistakes. So just one I'll mention just kind of a real life example is taking money from an employer plan as opposed to an IRA, right? So and again, because y'all live, I'm in this world, but a lot of folks don't understand that employer plans automatically withhold 20% and send that to Uncle Sam for taxes, whether that's what you ultimately pay or not. And so if you need to take some money out to buy a car or pay off a credit card or do whatever, give a gift away, you have to take out whatever you want plus 20% automatically off the top. So that means you have to take out even more. But if you roll that to an IRA, then you are in control of the taxes and maybe have 5% or 10 or 0 and do the taxes next year. But just gives you some flexibility and options there.
That is important because if you take out, if you need $8,000 for whatever it is and you take out 10 for taxes, but your tax bill is actually like 10%, well, that $1,000 that is going to Uncle Sam from the retirement plan is now no longer in the market. So you didn't just like send it to Uncle Sam for safekeeping until next year when you settle up. You also may have missed out on market growth, over the next however many months until 20 or whatever the next
You're paying for the taxes, but you're also paying the opportunity cost at the same time.
That's why it's more efficient to do it from an IRA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you get to control it and have a little bit more autonomy with how you do it.
And a third mistake could be based on the age, right? If someone is young enough where they might have a penalty, well, now all of a sudden that compounds the error because your penalty is also on the higher amount of taxes that were withheld.
Yes.
So Uncle Sam is kicking you while you're down.
And for our business owners, right? When you're starting a business, when you start a business, your expenses are typically really, really high. If you take that money out of a 401k plan, they're withholding that 20%. Whereas if you had taken it from the IRA, you get to choose and you have a lot more flexibility in that year of, starting your business or whatever you need it for. So there's a lot more opportunity there to control it as well.
And we talked about the vesting schedule and whatnot earlier on when looking at plan features and those types of things. When somebody has a vesting schedule, typically it's with a pension. How can someone make sure, we talked a lot about the 401ks and the importance of navigating that effectively. What are some important decisions, potential errors, or common mistakes that someone can make with pensions when they get to retirement?
I think Andrew, you talk about it, the pop-up benefit, right? Where you have a recommendation given to somebody who's about to retire. They've got a pension. They got to choose between their, 4 or 5 different options of how they want it paid out. A lot of times it is framed as you're married now, and then when somebody passes away, the benefit goes up. And so we've just seen, you typically spend less money when it's one of you versus 2 of you. So you've probably seen that more, Andrew. If you want to talk through that, I mean.
Yeah, no. You put it real succinctly. Generally, when you retire, Lord willing, you have your spouse still alive, and so 2 of y'all are spending on whatever, trips and food and 2 cars, gas. And so that's when you would like to have your income the highest. And so generally you'll have a pension option that provides a good amount. But if the spouse were to pass away, now all of a sudden you have more income. That seems like a mistake because you wasted that income during those years
probably
when you were
needed
both
more.
alive.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
to
then
go to Utah and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And then you brought up the tax issue as well, which is a great point. If you want to,
Yeah. So just from a tax perspective, your marginal tax bracket is going to be more efficient or more favorable when you're married, filing jointly, than when you're single. So married filing jointly in 2025, you're in the 12th percentile in up to 96,000 and some change. Whereas if you're single, it's like 48,000 or somewhere in that ballpark. That's about a $50,000 difference of money that is taxed at 22% versus 12. So taking more money early is going to be more efficient from a tax perspective because you're going to be in a more favorable tax bracket.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, you mentioned common mistakes earlier as a title, and this is one that can happen and can't be changed and just compounds year over year while you're living. You didn't plan for it. And then all of a sudden now later on with the tax issue, it's just a snowball of mistakes that are happening.
And I think that's an irrevocable decision.
I think you're right.
So it's a really important one that you want to make sure you get right on the front end.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot more that we can talk about. We've kind of limited the conversation here to retirement plans. I mean, there's more that we can talk about with retirement plans. I know for a future episode, we want to get more into common mistakes with investment planning, and there's going to be some overlap there with some of the topics. But I appreciate you guys unpacking these handful of ideas and kind of putting our audience on alert to some of these potential mistakes.
Yeah, hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sojourn Wealth Management Podcast. This is a friendly reminder that all content in this podcast is intended for educational purposes alone. Nothing in this episode should be treated as tax, legal, or investment advice. We encourage you to consult your financial professional for any of those needs. The securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Kestra IS or Kestra AS are not affiliated with Sojourn Wealth Management.